The following video consists of copyright of theories and possible plot threads to the inevitable, in my opinion, 10th volume of copyrighted material owned by the late Monty owned Crunchyroll, RoosterTeeth, Warner Discovery, Viz Media, and DC Comics, the current rights owners to RWBY. All characters' names, all character locations, and creature names are owned by the aforementioned individual parties. This is of my property, METS 2128, and it's covered under the Fair Rights Usage Act circa 1976. To put it bluntly, just because I say the names doesn't mean you can kick me off. Also, these are theories, not definite spoilers. So viewer discretion can be thrown out the window. Okay, so RWBY Volume 9 has Team Ruby and John back in Remnant after spending a 10-volume episode chapter arc in the realm of the Ever After, where Ruby and John basically where the group had to essentially find themselves and remember who they are. And for Jean and Ruby, it took the longest, more so for Ruby than Jean. But now they come armed with renewed confidence and knowledge that wasn't even known to Oz or even Salem about the brothers. So, how does Volume 10 play out? Well, let's start with that knowledge. Upon reuniting with everyone in Vacuo, Ruby approaches Oscar slash Ozpin, Glinda, Theodore, and whoever's taken over Haven Academy ever since it was compromised. And yes, I put emphasis on compromised, not fallen. Anyway, and she explains the true lore behind the story of the girl who fell through the world, the truth behind the Ever After, and the truth behind the brothers. This would infuriate Ozpin, and to some level allow him to sympathize with Salem. That this whole time, he's been going off the brothers' base knowledge of the definitions of balance. Yes, there must always be light and darkness, good and evil, yin yang, and so forth. But the kind of balance, again, that the brothers have been looking, and the fact that the brothers are not divine entities. They're created by an even greater entity, basically Ruby's version of Yggdrasil, the world tree of Nordic lore. I'm still a little mad that they went with the Alice in Wonderland motif and not the Nine Realm one for Volume 9. But regardless, upon discovering this revelation, Ozpin now would have some level of new insight, right? At least in my viewpoint. Meanwhile, Salem will have used a seer to realize Team Ruby and John are still alive. And she's gonna punish Cinder. Grant, she probably already knew at the end of Volume 8 that Cinder was lying to her about one, who burned up the last question, and two, what really happened within the pocket dimension. She'll torture Cinder until she confesses the truth. And when she does that, she's going to put Cinder on the sideline for most of the volume. But as we know, yet again, Cinder's lust for power will get the better of her, and this time she doesn't have someone to cover. And this time around, there's no one to cover her ass. Emerald's defected to the heroes. Mercury's on the verge of getting out of there, or he could die if he's while in Tyrion's care. And Cinder murdered Watts herself just to eliminate a potential whistleblower. Oh, and Neo's in the Ever After looking to ascend and find who she really is. Again. So, and knowing Cinder, she's going to go against Salem's wishes and do her best and do her damnedest, though a little more tactfully, similar to what Watts told her during Volume 8, to try and steal the power of the Summer Maiden. Though, granted, I think Salem would have already found the perfect replacement. Jackie of the Crown Syndicate, which would lead to Mercury and Tyrion forming an alliance with Jackie and Jillian, gender swaps of Jack and Jill. If you've read any of the RWBY novels that center around Vacuo, you'll know who these two are. Now, the whole Blake and Yang dynamic. Blake and Yang are now officially a couple, much to my personal annoyance. Anyone who knows me knows that I am against excessive LGBTQIA romantic pairings. Emphasis on excessive. To me, Bumblebee is kind of excessive, even if Monty had this plan to be canon as far back as Volume 2. And anyone who remembers Aaron and Barbara's little celebration on Instagram will know why I view that when I say this. Inside the show, Bumblebee I view as a gray area, but outside of it, it's toxic. It's very toxic. But getting back on track, I think Blake's going to be at that point with her character where she's going to do everything she can to try to avoid the same missteps she made with Adam. And to me, this could rub Yang the wrong way to the point where she's going to ask Blake to give her some space. And this is where Sun would come back into the mix. Now, granted, I'm not for a love triangle. I mean, Black Bumblebee ship would be fine. A Sunny Bumblebee ship would be fine, given the fact that Blake, I was certain was more along the lines of being bisexual than more bisexual than lesbian, but whatever. But more or less, Sun is there to basically be a confidant and try to give advice to Blake on maybe you shouldn't go to such extreme, telling Blake maybe you shouldn't go to such extremes to keep Yang from going down the same path that Adam took. I don't know. As for Yang, this is pretty much new territory for her. For Yang, on the other hand, this is relatively new territory. So, in a way, you could say that to some level, she doesn't really know what to do. But before we get to the Blake Yang issues that could pop up, let's focus on getting Willow, Crow, and Weiss sober, because I think at this point, Crow and Willow are back in the bottle, and Weiss has started to take, and Winter has started to take to the bottle. So, finding them in a pub in a drunken mess would pretty much harm Ruby Yang, and Weiss, and they'd have to snap these three individuals out of it. Now, would it be a quick fix to get them off the bottle, quick off the sauce immediately? Yeah, perhaps. But when they find out that Tyrion's in Vacuo from Emerald, oh boy. Crow is going to be on the warpath. And I think to a lesser extent, he'll find a kindred spirit in Harriet, or if you want revenge which will lead to Crow, Robin, and Harriet teaming up to take down Tyrion. We all know this volume will probably be Tyrion's swan song. He's gonna die. But how does he do it? How's it happen? Who knows? It could either be Mercury finally fed up with the abuse, goes after him and slaughters him. Emerald teams up with him and they take Tyrion down together. Or the trio of Harriet, Crow, and Robin taking him down. Or a combination of all three of these options. It could be 5-on-1, and with Tyrion having no way out, he gets put out of his misery once and for all. As we've seen, there's no reason for him to stand trial. Twice he's been captured, and twice he's escaped. The son of a bitch is too dangerous to be left alive now. But now here's the other issue with this character. Who's going to be the new VA? We already know as of last year, Josh Grelle openly stated he quit on his Twitter account. He was quitting the show, that he quit RWBY after it got out that the company was not as pro LGBTQT as he believed it was. For those wondering, Josh is gay/queer. Personally, I just call it LGBTIA and leave the Q out of it, because to me, G's and Q's are basically one and the same. And gays and queers are essentially one and the same. There's not much of a difference to me. And what little difference there is, I can't find it. Regardless, Tyrion's dying this album. And as for the voice actor, who would I choose? I would choose Chris Patton for the role. Why Chris? He has quite a few tiny roles in his background that required him to play these kinds of bloodthirsty lunatics. I mean, psychotic and semi, if not also incredibly bloodthirsty lunatics. I mean, yes, he's most synonymous for characters like Sergeant Sosuke Sagara in Full Metal Panic and the original version of Greed the Avaricious in both iterations of Full Metal Alchemist, but probably his two most psychotic roles, and the two that most people don't bother to look at, would be Tatsuhiro Sato in the main character in Welcome to the NHK, and probably the role that would best fit for him to dive back into, Creed Disknith, the main antagonist in Black Cat, from Black Cat. Yeah, I'm pulling a lot of oldies out for this one. Chris has that potential to go from normal to psycho just like that when he does a character that fits something around the scope of Tyrion. And I think and again, and if he goes through the Creed phase of his career, Patton playing Tyrion, it's a perfect fit. Anyway, moving on. Emerald's whole storyline would be to try to get Mercury away from Tyrion, no matter what. Only to be intercepted by Cinder at some point, because she'd probably be going after the power of the Summer Maiden. At some point, the vault underneath Shade Academy gets unlocked, and gets open, and the sword gets pulled out. Probably as a last resort. But as for who's the spirit of the sword, if we're going by Arthurian lore in the same way we did with the staff, based on Merlin, it has to be individuals with Merlin being one of the individuals responsible for the creation of Camelot. We have to base it on any one of the individuals who are responsible for Camelot's downfall. Those individuals would have to be either. That would be Sir Lancelot, Morgan Le Fay, or Mordred. One of those three will be representing the spirit of the sword. Whichever one it is would be a perfect fit. And personally, I don't care for the voice actors. Now, as for Professor Theodore, if he's as charismatic as the books I know of claim that he is, there's only one VA I think that could do it. Someone who's worked with RoosterTeeth before in the short term. That individual is Chris Rager. As much as I don't like the guy, he'd be a perfect fit for Theodore. Specifically, if you have him delve into the Mr. Satan esque persona from Dragon Ball. Loud, charismatic, cocky, but I'll bet beneath the surface, he's a bit of a wimp, bit of a little shit weasel. Granted, Dorothy Gale, who the character of Theodore is based off of, I'm pretty sure is not a shit weasel on the level of Mr. Satan. But the vocal performance would be adequate. It would be adequate for him. As for the assist deputy headmistress, Professor Rumpelstiltskin's gender swap, this is a tough one. Yeah, I'm also going through voice actor choices. No one likes Monica anymore. Jamie's a little more tolerable between the bitch duo, but I'm not sure if she'd be a good fit for it. Colleen? Nah. Brina? Too young. Brittany? Same issue as Brina. I mean, Brina can play slightly older characters like Juvia and Fairy Tale, or characters that sound older like Juvia, but I'm not sure if she'd be a good fit. Lydia McKay? Nah, nah. Linda Young? Maybe, but I doubt it, especially with how many cons she's popped up with alongside Vic Mignogna since the whole 2019 fiasco. Not likely with her. The odds are not likely. But if Professor Rumpel is as devious as her counterpart, Jamie would be the best fit. I'm giving it to Jamie Markey as much as I don't want to. Especially if she's actually turns out to be Salem's sleeper agent or mole operative within the ranks of Shade Academy. It would not surprise me if that were the case. I mean, Lionheart was basically under Salem's heel from the entirety of the story, from when the story started, even predating Volume 1, up to his death in Volume 5. Anyway, as for Jean with reuniting with Ren and Nora, he'll bring them up to speed as to what happened too. And Ren would actually be shocked, but when using his semblance to tell if Nora's his Jean's emotions, he'll see he's telling the truth. Nora would be elated to know that she didn't lose another teammate in the same way she lost Pyrrha. But now things are about to hit the fan. What happens to the. Also, I forgot to mention if Ty's also there alongside Raven, Ruby tells the truth about what really happened that night, why Salem captured Summer, and why she wants Ruby alive, and why she wanted the staff. For those wondering why I believed Salem wanted the staff, and Arnold and I did go back and forth on this, albeit, and Murder of Birds and I, albeit briefly on this Discord server, did go back and forth on this a couple of times in the build up to the ninth volume. I still firmly believe that Salem needs the staff for mass production of silver-eyed Grim hybrids, since technically you could view Grim as inorganic beings, as beings or items that are technically inorganic. Plus, as a added bonus to Salem, it doesn't drain her or cripple her of her magical reserves in the same way it would if she did naturally. Why else was she only able to make one at a time, one of these beasts at a time? With Ambrosius, she can basically enslave him to mass produce these monstrosities. At least that's how I'm looking at it. And that would make perfect sense, would it not? Now, as for the sword's power, again, if we go by opposites, the sword, if you swing, you aim it at one target, it'll destroy it upon swinging. But as a trade off, once you switch it to a different target, it'll focus on that different target, on that new target. Anyway, after that, the sword is pulled out of vacuo. He is pulled out of vacuo. The summer main dies. God knows who gets the power. Who gets the power after that? I would assume it would be either Yang or It would be either Blake or Emerald. But as a precautionary measure, I'm going to give the summer main power to Emerald. I'm going to give Emerald the summer main power, so she can at least for a time fight Cinder on equal footing. On equal footing. And this is especially if Emerald comes in contact act for a time and befriends whoever the Summer Maiden is. At which point, Cinder faces someone who knows her like the back of her hand. But once the sword is out of the vault, Cinder is forced to flee, and it doesn't matter if it's taken by a hero or a villain. Vacuo's safe, but it would come at a cost. At that point, it becomes a once volume 10 wraps up, the whole deal revolve the next volume, in my view, would result in a race. It turns into a race back to Vale. And then the final volume, we go back to where it all began, Beacon Academy, to get the crown wherever it's been hidden. Especially if Oscar taps into Ozpin's memories and realizes and uncovers where Ozpin hid the crown. At which point, it becomes a race back. Then we get to the final battle, the summoning of the brothers, Ruby chewing them up and spitting them out, and Ruby deciding to chew them up and spit them out verbally, calling them out on their own hypocrisies, their own inability to learn from their own mistakes, and their own desire and their own pettiness. From not learning their own, thinking that they're better than humanity when they weren't. They're just as flawed as humanity. Granted, the brothers themselves are as much flawed creations as their own creations. And they should be held accountable for their own for their stupid, overbearingly curiosity based experimentations. And be sent back to the ever after to ascend. And then the door. Now, I think by that point, Neo will come back, but not as Neapolitan. As the person, she will be back as the person she discarded. Trivia Vanille. Too long had Hyde been the driver's seat. It's time for Jekyll to take back the reins. And when it's over, Salem may finally be defeated. Ozpin can rest in peace. His consciousness will fade from Oscar's mind. He and Ruby tie the knot, as do Ren and Nora, Yang and Blake, and possibly even John and Weiss. Weiss hands over the reins to the rebuilt and reorganized SDC company to her brother Whitley, while she continues to be a huntress, marries into the Arc family, as opposed to Jean marrying into the Schnee one. Winter takes over as head of Atlas Academy, while Marrow becomes the head of the Elysian military. Glinda takes over as full-time headmistress of Beacon Academy. Menagerie is allowed to expand, and then more fawns will be given their own little patch of land. While the Grimm will be reduced to mindless animals, making huntsmen less needed, without a mistress to guide them. Emerald and Mercury will serve their time in prison, get out on parole, and probably do something with their lives beyond what they with their lives. I don't know what, but they will. Ilya will be the new head of the White Fang, leading it down the path to a new era of peace. When it's been restructured and reformed. And as for Cinder, she'll end up dead by John's hand. Because let's face it, Salem is Ruby's end. Not just Ruby the character, but Team Ruby as a whole. At that point in time, when we get to Volume 12, whether that be in 2026 or 2027, or even 2028 for that matter, that will be RWBY coming to a close. And things will be brought to a new era of peace. Maybe we'll get a sequel series centered around a new generation. On second thought, maybe not. Second thought, scrap the idea of making a sequel series based around the new generation. Mostly because we've seen how Boruto, and Yashahime played out. Yashahime was fine for what we got out of it. But Boruto, in my view, has been unbearable. Throw in the fact that right now both the manga and anime are on a 4-month hiatus. How many of our favorite characters from the previous generation got nerfed for a title character who is a far cry from his father. Who is a far cry, right, way off, chip off the block when compared to his father. Anyway, that's how I view Volume 10 and even beyond playing out. Leave a comment, smash the like, and sub to the channel. This is Mets2128 signing out. I'll bid you adieu. Don't expect another RWBY Material video from me for a while. So until then, goodbye. Good fucking night. Bang.